Hello everyone, and welcome to this tutorial on how you can make green stuff tabards without needing to actually sculpt anything. So I'm pretty excited about this one because I've been working on it for a little while and I think it might help some people out. So I'll just go through the materials that you'll need. This is just a couple of small cheap bits of wood that I've stuck together pretty securely, just with a couple of nails and some PVA glue. You just want it thin enough that the clamps will fit around it, and you want one piece high enough that the Space Marine can kind of be clamped at the top, and then you can do some stretching, and you'll see why that's relevant later. Then we just have the body of the guy itself. You can see I haven't added his arms or his head or his backpack or anything. Just the torso is nice and securely stuck together. Now we have the zip tie. So this is just a small zip tie, the smallest out of a variety pack. It's kind of thin enough that it can fit around his waist there, you can see. It's about the same thickness as his belt, which works quite nicely for our purposes. Then the clips themselves. So these are the really heavy duty ones to sort of hold the Space Marine onto that little wooden jig we've made up there. Then you can grab a variety of other clamps for messing around with. So these are just little ones. I've also had some success with these little hair clips that I nicked from my girlfriend, which she loves, of course. And then the next thing that you're going to need is putty. So we've got green stuff and melee putt. Now it's important that you have both green stuff and melee putt. I'll go into that a bit later, but we basically use a 50-50 mix of each. Then we have a old beaten up knife for cutting up putty so you don't wreck your fresh blades, and we have a nice crisp fresh X-Acto blade for that precision work. Not that there's too much precision work involved here. Then of course the star of the show, the latex glove. So yep, there you go, latex. Don't get nitrile. You need latex because nitrile does not sort of conform in the same way. You can see that while I'm moving this around, we're getting some folds and creases, and that might give you some idea of where this whole thing's going. So, on to the first step, which is mixing up your green stuff mix. So like I say, you just want a 50-50 mix of melee putt and green stuff, so equal parts of all 4 components, if you know what I mean. The reason we do this is green stuff is a bit too flexible by itself, melee putt is completely rigid by itself. When you combine the two, you basically get the best properties of each. So you get something that's fairly rigid with a tiny bit of flexibility in it so it's not brittle, that can also be sort of sanded and worked with nicely, and it dries way quicker and is a lot less likely to show up fingerprints. So here I'm just making sure that it's very mixed up and there's no big lumps or anything in it. And then what you want to do is just cut one finger off one of your latex gloves. Just kind of, there you go, hold it steady like that. You want to get the whole finger as well, because you need some space to be able to stretch and clamp this thing. And then once you've done that, you just want to grab your green stuff, and then I kind of start molding it into a rectangular shape that's maybe a couple of mil thick, something like that. You can see here. And you can experiment, you can mess around with the shapes that you start with, the thicknesses that you start with. I definitely haven't tried every variation of this method. As far as I know, it's a brand new method. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, but I think that there's a lot of potential. I've made capes and stuff out of it as well. Looks pretty cool, and I'll do a tutorial on them at some point in the future as well. So you can see here we've just got a little rectangle of it, and you want to open up the latex glove and then just drop it in. This is easier if you let the putty dry for 5 minutes or so, because it gets less sticky. As you can see, this is dropped in and just stuck straight away, but that's not actually a problem. So in this case, it's gone right down to the tip of the finger. If it doesn't go all the way down to the tip, that's alright. You just kind of want it so that the rectangle is lined up in the same direction as the finger. And then what we're going to do is just press that in. So make sure that all the surfaces of the putty have kind of adhered to the latex glove, so you can see I'm really going for it. So pressing it in nice and firm, and you don't want to worry about any wrinkles or anything. In fact, you want to encourage them, because more wrinkles in the glove means more wrinkles and detail in the sort of final tabard. So you can see there that we got a couple of nice little wrinkles. Got some bits where the glove's kind of stuck and then folded up a little bit, and that's good. So then I just kind of grab the zip tie, pre-zip it, if that's what it's called, just enough so that it can still go around the Space Marine. You can see after a little bit more mushing around, we've got a few nice sort of creases and folds in this glove here. So now onto the exciting bit, which is kind of the fastest and easiest bit. This really doesn't require any special skills. I used to just manually sculpt these things. Takes ages, and if you haven't practiced heaps and heaps, it can be very, very difficult. So this is just kind of a much easier method. So you can see there we've put the glove with a little bit on either side of the zip tie, around about where we want the tabard to go, and then we'll just fasten that up. Make sure it's, you know, nice and tight. Zip tie is unlikely to break your model, and the trunk of a Space Marine's pretty sturdy. And then sort of just start, you know, pulling it, bending it around, see what kind of shape or direction you want. You know, do you want some movement in it? Do you want it to be hanging straight down? You can go pretty extreme with the movement as well. You know, are there bits of the leg that you can kind of hook it onto to maybe make it look a little bit more integrated into the model? And pulling it also kind of adds to the amount of creases that you'll get, because it pulls the latex a little bit underneath the zip tie, which then kind of pinches. That's kind of what you want. So now we'll clamp him down. I just put one clamp sideways of the arms there, and use another clamp to clamp that clamp. I'm going to greatly overuse the word clamp here, so that he's got a bit of distance still between him and that bottom piece of the jig. And then I'm kind of liking the idea of this tabard following his right leg there. So you can see I've angled it off to the side, going down the bottom there. You can see we've got some nice sort of creases happening. So now I'll grab another clamp, and this one doesn't have the little rubber protectors on there, because that way you get sort of a nice sharp corner where the corner of the clamp meets the latex, and that kind of encourages, you know, more creases. So that's kind of the name of the game here. You want to encourage as many creases as you can. I'm sure there are plenty of methods that I haven't come up with for doing that. You can also kind of prod it around on the model itself. It'll tend to reset to the shape it's being pulled into, but if you've got things that you can hook it around or something like that, then you can get some pretty cool results. So here I'm just playing around with it, just messing about, seeing what kind of shapes and creases look cool, what I like. See, I've pulled it over there, and I think that's pretty groovy. It's got a bit of a look to it. So now I'll just grab one of the smaller clamps, and you can go as crazy or as simple as you like at this stage, in terms of sort of getting it in the shape and direction that you want. I mean, not all of these are going to turn out either. It's, you know, it's possible that you make one, you let it dry, you take it out, and it's not exactly what you hoped. But really, greenstuff and milliput, they're not that expensive, and this doesn't take a huge amount of time. So for the possibility of adding a pretty unique twist to your army, for me it's worth it. So there we go. I'm happy with that one, so I'll just leave it to dry. Come back about 8 hours later or so. You can leave it overnight. There'd be absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I'd probably encourage it. And here we go. We have the dried, no sculpt greenstuff tabard. So I've just popped off all the clamps, take off the zip tie, and there he is. Now it doesn't look like much at this stage, so there's a little bit of cleaning up and sort of fastening. We've also got to release it from the latex glove. You can, if you want, really Black Templar it up, put a chain around where the zip tie was for a cool little chain belt there. That would work nicely. You could even carve away the old belt buckle so that it's not protruding too much, but that's it's not what we're doing today. What we're going to do is glue it on, so it's just like a regular tabard that comes out from underneath the belt. So you'll need some super glue, and you'll need your hobby knife. pop it off, and you can see it's kind of conformed really nicely, because obviously it was putty when it went on there. Now it's dry, so it's got a place that it wants to sit, which kind of makes it look an awful lot more integrated into the model than just gluing on like a third-party resin tabard or something like that. So I'm just cutting up the glove, and then you sort of slice the glove and then peel it back. So you want to be a bit careful with this because you don't want to tear the putty itself. Luckily, when this stuff's fully dry, which mine's 95% dry here, but when it's fully dry, it's pretty sturdy. So you're not likely to damage it unless there's really, really thin bits. But just take your time. Be pretty careful with this one. You know, make some smaller cuts. Pull up in line with the creases, so you're not putting too much pressure on any one bit of this tabard. See, just kind of keep going like that, and there we go. And the little bit that was above the zip ties just come off there, which is exactly what we want. And so now I'm just finding the lines that I like for the edge of the tabard. So this one had this little extra crease here, which if I remove will have a very smooth kind of edge, and that's what will happen with this, because the putty will kind of taper out to being paper thin at the end. So you just find the last good crease and then cut at the end of that. And then there's just one little extra crease up here that I'm going to remove. Probably didn't have to get rid of this one, but you know, just kind of whatever looks right. Use your hobbyist's eye. Use your judgment. So now we'll just cut off the bit that was directly under the zip tie, because that will be exactly where his belt was. And then we have a tabard that basically goes all the way up to the belt. And the other thing is that the bits right at the top are going to be very thin, and because there's some green stuff in here, they'll also be flexible, which we'll use later. So now I'm just defining the bottom of the tabard, so I like that kind of a line. You know, add a bit of an angle, give it a little bit of a swish, and just slice through that, and then kind of clean it up. Make sure at some point you kind of duck out of frame, and then just test fit it. So because this basically fits in without any glue, it's very easy to test fit. There we go. So it sits on quite nicely. Make sure that it doesn't protrude sort of below his feet, so it'll actually fit on a base. And then what we want to do is kind of just poke and prod around a bit to see which bits are fitting nicely and which bits we might need to trim. So for example, there's a couple of little bits going over the top of the belt buckle here, which I'll want to get rid of. There we go. So now they can all sort of fit in underneath the belt buckle, and because you've got that little bit of flex, once you put the glue down, you can kind of press the thin parts at the top of the tabard into that glue underneath the belt. And to be honest, that's something that's really difficult, even if you're traditionally sculpting these things, to get it nice and thin and actually looking like it's coming out from underneath the belt. So that's pretty good. So I've just lined that whole area and under the belt with super glue. Unfortunately, I ducked out a frame there, so you couldn't see it, but you get the idea. And here I'm just pressing the little thin bits at the top into that glue. Come on. There we go. You can see we've got a nice clean line at the edge there, and everything's kind of tucked in underneath the belt. And this is, you know, I'm not sculpting putty here. This is all completely dry. All the folds are rigid. Nothing's going to get deformed or destroyed. This is just pushing it into some glue to keep it in place. And there it is. But there's one more thing. It's just a tiny little gap on the right hand side, so I'll cover that up with a knife. And that's not something that always happens, just, you know, every now and then. So now what I'll do is wet a paintbrush and just go over the top of this. Because it's got milliput in it, you can kind of smooth it with water in a way that you can't with green stuff. So this is just to make sure there's no, you know, sort of nice and clean and smooth. And there it is, the finished product. So hopefully this has been a bit of help, and you try it out on your guys. So here's a few finished examples. That's the one that we just did, and here are a couple more static ones. These have just been blue tacked. But yeah, I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you do try them out, then let me know how it goes. Awesome, cheers.